How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Well, hello there. Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
Oh, Mark, you know what? I could see you thinking before the introduction today, because it's now different each time. Totally love it.
And I came to the conclusion seconds before I opened my mouth, too.
Yeah.
How was it?
Great. I think it was great. It's that limbic spontaneity coupled with a little bit of prefrontal cortical, anticipation. It's great. It was great. Really, really nice. We had a good week.
Yes, great week. Love this holiday season. It's always so festive and magical.
Yeah, it really is. And not so cold, but it's starting to get a little colder. Not too bad. It's good.
Doable.
Perhaps you could introduce our guest, Tom McCoy.
Absolutely, Dr. Joe. Tonight we're honored to have TC Morrison. TC Morrison is an alumnus of Audubon University and New York University School of Law and served 4 years in the U.S. Air Force Judge Advocate General Corps before joining the New York law firm Rogers & Wells, becoming a partner in 1975. He later worked at Patterson Belknap Webb and Tyler for 34 years, becoming a prominent figure in advertising and trademark litigation, and concluded his career at Mannett, Phelps, and Phillips in New York. Morrison, reflecting on his legal career, authored satirical novels about class action lawyers. With his first book, Torts Are Us, and the highly acclaimed second book, Please Pass The Torts, featured in the New York Post. Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
Welcome, TC Morrison.
Thank you.
It is such a pleasure having you here. So how did you shift over from doing the litigation work, advertising, trademark, into becoming an author?
Actually, it was fairly easy. I love novels, and I always wanted to write a novel. When I was spent 4 years in the Air Force, the demands on my time weren't all that heavy, so I actually wrote what I called a spy novel. I sent it to several publishers. Luckily, none of them accepted it, and it's never seen the light of day.
Isn't that quite appropriate for a spy novel? Really? I mean, spies are never meant to be really seen, so I think that fits quite well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were saying.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So in any event, I put aside the idea of writing any kind of fiction because I was really engrossed in a very demanding practice for 45, 46 years. As I was approaching retirement and began thinking about what I would do after I retired, my thoughts went back to my dream of writing a novel. This time, I had the common sense to write about something I knew about, which was modern American litigation. After all, I didn't know anything about spying except what I saw in movies or read in Ian Fleming novels. But having spent 45 years in state and federal courts throughout the country, I felt I knew quite a bit about the legal world. So that led to my decision to write novels about the modern day practice of law.
Novels about the modern day practice of law. Tell me more about that.
More specifically, satirical novels. I didn't want to write a serious book about the law. I figured nobody would read it. I didn't want to write a legal thriller. There are too many of those out. But when I looked at my career, the cases I did, cases I read about, I realized there's a lot of humor in the law. And most lawyers take themselves way too seriously. And I thought, I'm going to write a book about the humor in modern day litigation. And I went at it by creating a pair of twin brothers, Pap and Pup, who both are with big firms, have traditional practices, and decide to leave their law firms and set up a plaintiff's class action firm where they could both have more fun and make more money. And off and running, doing a series of wacky class action cases for wacky clients in front of wacky judges and with wacky adversaries.
Mark, I saw you
I
lean
love it.
in.
I can't wait to read it.
I saw you lean in
I've
right away
actually
and
written.
start giggling.
I hope so. That's my intent, and certainly a lot of readers have commented that they just laugh out loud as they're reading the books. There's actually been 3 of them. The initial book was called Torts Are Us, and that introduced these 2 characters. And at that time, I thought maybe I would just write 1 book. But all of my friends and colleagues who read it really loved it and said I should really do more. So that led me to write the second one, Please Pass The Torts. And then most recently, the people that contacted you were promoting the 3rd book in the series, Send in the Tort Lawyers. That book just came out in October, and I kind of like it the best, and so do a lot of my readers.
So let me ask you, you were a tort attorney, I assume?
No. I was a litigator. I tried cases and argued appeals around the country, mainly for major pharmaceutical and consumer products clients. Many of the cases were in the false advertising and trademark field, but others were just everyday commercial litigation between big clients.
So you were defending the client?
No, generally prosecuting.
Okay.
Which is why I was so enamored of my practice. When I was at Patterson Belknap, the firm I spent most of my time with, we were the firm that first developed the concept of false advertising litigation, whereby companies would sue their competitors for false advertising. Up to that time, false advertising matters were handled at the FTC in administrative proceedings that took years. And we came up with a provision in the Lanham Act that we felt covered false advertising. And under the Lanham Act, as in a trademark case, you can sue your competitor. And we really pioneered a whole new field of law. Today, all the major firms have lawyers who do false advertising litigation, but we were really pioneering that whole field.
I have a question. What is a tort? Because I know that I've been taught things at school, but my guess is it's not even the same spelling.
No, a tort is just a non-criminal wrong. A car somebody rams you, rear ends your car. That's a tort. You have a swimming pool, a kid falls in it and is injured. That's a tort. Any kind of a wrong that doesn't rise to the level of a criminal matter would be considered a tort.
Typically, it's a negligent act, so you would have to prove that you were negligent in some way.
Yeah.
You weren't criminal.
Right.
However, you were negligent.
Yeah, zillions of those cases are filed every year against doctors, against consumer product companies. I never did that kind of litigation. I had no real desire to do it. I got exposed to class action litigation in my final years when I was with Manat, Phelps, and Phillips. They did a lot of defense of consumer class action litigation, and they would call on me for advice about the advertising issues in the case. I never really wanted to litigate those kinds of cases because they never go to trial. They always get settled. There's a huge, a big complaint, press conference, and thousands of plaintiffs join in. But those cases almost always get settled because the corporations that are sued can't really afford to take them to trial. The kind of litigation I did was very different. It was cases that really mattered to the clients. For example, advertising. If your competitor was making a major claim about their product, they're not going to stop making it just because you told them you think it's false. You take them to court and you have a little trial. And that was more than probably 50% of the cases I did were in that realm. So those cases meant something to the clients, and the stakes were fairly high, and the cases generally went to trial.
So let me ask you this: Did you feel guilt? Did you feel any sense of guilt satirizing your profession?
Actually, not at all. And a lot of the readers of the book are themselves lawyers or have some connection with the legal profession. All my lawyer friends love them. Even the tort lawyers. Here's something interesting. The most famous tort lawyer in the U.S. is Ralph Nader. You probably remember him, Unsafe at Any Speed. He founded a museum in Winstead, Connecticut called the National Tort Museum. It's an homage to tort lawyers who bring tort cases. About a month ago, I did a book reading and signing at the Tort Museum. They love my books. They bought 20 of them, and they're on sale. So even tort lawyers have a good sense of humor.
That's pretty impressive, though. Ralph Nader certainly was a well-known name in my era.
Yeah, he has a great museum. The original Corvair that was the subject of his book, Unsafe at Any Speed, is on display there. It's a fascinating museum.
Huh. So TC, tell us a bit about the latest book, Send in the Tort Lawyers. What's going on with that?
Well, it's frankly, it's a continuation. It's the third book in a series, continuation of the lives and loves of the lawyers in this firm, Peters and Peters, Patrick Peters and his twin brother, Prescott Peters. As I said earlier, they left their respective firms to start up this class action firm. Patrick is the street smart guy. He comes up with all the crazy ideas. His brother, Prescott, is more cerebral, intellectual, hesitant. He always has a reason why the cases aren't going to work, and they're going to be a waste of time. But yet, using his smarts, he's always able to figure out a legal angle that will help him. So each book, I would say, except for the first one, which is a little different because I had to introduce the brothers and their prior life. But the second half of the first book and then the next two books, I would say basically cover a year in the life of the firm of Peters and Peters. And in each of those situations, they have a series of wacky clients who come to them with wacky claims, and they file these lawsuits. Just for example, a case that's in both the second book and the third book involves an attempt to free all the chimpanzees in the Bronx Zoo, because the chimpanzees would really like to live free on an animal refuge rather than being locked up in cages. Now, I didn't just make up that case. In every case in all three books has a real life counterpart of an actual case that really happened and was brought in real life. What I did was take the cases and stretch them and add on to them. But there was a lawsuit. There have been several lawsuits to free animals in zoos, including a lawsuit to free the chimpanzees in the Bronx Zoo. What I added to the situation, which none of the real life lawyers thought to do, I had the Peters brothers come up with an animal communicator named Dr. Doolittle, who actually communicates with animals. And he went to the Bronx Zoo and he talked to the chimpanzees and was able to tell the court that these chimpanzees are very unhappy and they really would like to live free. So that was a wrinkle that was not in the real life cases.
Yeah, certainly a very lofting experience. That was a Hugh Lofting reference to Dr. Doolittle, for those who know the author. So let me ask you, how do you get the ideas? What's your writing process? We've had several authors on. I'm fascinated. What is your writing process?
For me, the key is to, in each book, to identify the cases I want to zero in on. The second and the third book are similar in that they both have about 4 or 5 major cases that occur in the course of a year in the life of this law firm. So the first key for me is identifying something that I've read about that I think would be a good subject. The best example is the current book, Send in the Tort Lawyers. The most interesting case in that book is a takeoff on FTX, the Sam Bankman-Fried cryptocurrency case. I was starting to research and pull together ideas about a year ago Thanksgiving for the third book, just as that story was hitting the papers. And every day, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post, two papers I read every day, had a new story every day. And I thought, this story is too good to be true, and it lends itself easily to satire. In fact, I actually wrote an article for publication called "Stranger Than Fiction." This story truly is stranger than fiction. You have this. He was then about 24 years old. This kid who dressed every day in sandals, a t-shirt, shorts, and a baseball cap. Even if he was meeting with clients and investment bankers, he was always playing on his cell phone, even during meetings. He was said to be worth more than $30 million. He was living with a bunch of kids in this condo complex in the Bahamas that they paid millions of dollars for. They were all having sexual relationships with each other. It was just a totally bizarre story. And this kid became the sort of the hero of the crypto craze. And investors and financiers were pouring huge amounts of money into this firm. And then they decided to promote the crypto to everyday consumers. And that's where my book picks up, because they used several celebrities to promote the FTX's crypto. You may have seen the commercials. Tom Brady and his then wife, Gisele Bündchen, were in several commercials. Harry David was in a commercial that was aired at the Super Bowl on the big screen during halftime at the Super Bowl. It was just incredible. And that led to everyday investors investing in this crypto. They had no idea what they were doing. The financial types love crypto because they can trade on it and hopefully its value goes up. But everyday people were investing in it. And I think over the number is over 1 million investors invested in FTX crypto. They took in 16 million of customer money, and 10 million of that was turned over by Bankman-Fried to a sister company. It was really a hedge fund making investments, and all that money was lost. The investors were left with no recovery. So that all happened as I was planning out this third book, and I thought, this is too good to be true. So I didn't really have to change much. That's the odd thing. Other than changing the names of the celebrities and the names of the principals and the name of the company. Instead of FTX, it's FUX in the book. And their crypto, instead of FTT, is just FU crypto. But I didn't really have to change the underlying facts. So that's a perfect example of how something in the news became the subject of one of the cases in the books. The other cases in that book are merely based on my ongoing reading of legal developments. The New York Post is a wonderful source for me because they have a knack of covering zany stories that happen around the country. So I identified other cases to write about. One was the Belgian chocolates case. There was a big lawsuit by people who had bought Godiva Belgian chocolates, discovered the chocolates had been made not in Belgium, but in Reading, Pennsylvania. And they concluded that they had been defrauded, and they filed a lawsuit. So that case is in the book. Another case that was in the news at about that time, Madison Square Garden, the owner of Madison Square Garden, James Dolan, one of the most hated entrepreneurs in New York City, he had a blacklist, and any lawyer or member of a law firm that was involved in a lawsuit against Madison Square Garden would not be admitted to the garden or to Radio City, which he also owned. So that became an interesting topic for a case in the book. So I put together about 4 or 5 cases like that, and then developed them as the brothers take on the cases, develop them, and then obviously they almost always result in a win with a nice fee to the Peters and Peters firm. The only case they lost was the Chimps case. The New York courts in real life and in my book decided that chimps did not have a right to file lawsuits to demand their freedom. So you can't win them all.
You can't win them all, but they're certainly monkeying around with that one. Commentaries really on things that are happening in the world today, and then you're taking them and you're finding the humor in them, the satirical component to it.
Yeah, there's actually a hidden serious message in the 3 books, and that has to do with the abuse of the class action system. Class actions play a real valid role in the legal world, and ironically, the one case in all 3 books that I think was truly a legitimate use of class actions was the FTX Bankman-Fried case. That really, real people were injured and they deserve to be represented. The other cases, though, the Belgian chocolates case, there's no real victim to whether the chocolates are made in Reading, Pennsylvania or Belgium. And yet, in real life, there was a real life class action case. There was a real life settlement. The Godiva ended up paying $15 million to get rid of the case. And guess what? The members of the class, each member of the class got $15 unless they had a proof of purchase of your Belgian chocolate. Then you got $25. The lawyers walked away with $5 million. So that's where the money goes. And I have a lot of fun with that in the book, and the brothers have a lot of fun litigating the case. But it's in my judgment, a good example of how the class action system is being abused for cases that have no real business being litigated in modern day courts.
Off air, we were also talking a little bit about your feeling about the class action suit and system in general. Tell us a bit about your thoughts on that.
Well, as I said earlier, I think class actions play a really legitimate role in the American judicial system. Take the Bernie Madoff scandal, take the Sam Bankman-Fried crypto, or take an airline plane crash, or the 9/11 buildings collapsing. All of those cases, there's no way they could be handled by an individual plaintiff because there are so many of them. Those lend themselves to class action treatment. You have real people who suffered real injuries. The cases I'm concerned about are the type that are in my book. They're heavy on food advertising because that's where the biggest part of the fraud occurs. A lot of them have to do with food ingredients. For example, a box of cereal with a picture of fruit on it, but there's no actual fruit in the box, just maybe fruit flavoring. There was a case involving Fruit Loops, and there was a case involving a cereal, which made it into my second book. I called it the Corny Flakes case. Corny Flakes was reformulated and called Berry Good, Berry Good Corny Flakes, with a picture of blueberries on a very beautiful bowl of Corny Flakes. The plaintiff who bought them, when she took them home, expected to find blueberries in her Corny Flakes, and there were none. It was just blueberry flavoring. She emptied the whole box. I think she used 20 separate bowls and emptied the whole box into 20 separate bowls, but was unable to find a single berry. So she filed a lawsuit, became a class action, and guess what? The makers of Corny Flakes made a nice settlement, and our plaintiff got a few $1,000s, and the Peters law firm got a few $1 million as legal fees. That's the issue in all of these cases. Does a picture of berries sitting on a bowl of Corny Flakes, does that send the message to the consumer that there are actual Corny Flakes in the bowl? And so, number one, a company needs to be careful about showing something on its package that may not be really true. Or if it wants to do that, it better put a disclaimer about, no actual blueberries in this, merely blueberry flavoring. But that's a very fertile source of litigation. There are lots of cases involving food products like that. I chose Corny Flakes to focus on in my second book. But there are a lot of cases out there like that. The problem with these cases, though, is that there's generally enough in the complaint that will get the plaintiff by a motion to dismiss. And once it gets by a motion to dismiss, you have 2 years of discovery, followed by a trial. And a corporation just wants to get on with its business. It doesn't want to spend 2 years litigating something like this. So they enter into these settlements. And the plaintiff's lawyers know that. That's their objective. They're not bringing these cases to take them to trial. They're bringing these cases to get settlements. There's a lawyer in New York who in the year, I think was 2020, there were a total of 160 consumer class action cases filed in New York State. This one lawyer filed 120 of them. He was known as the king of torts, and they were all food related cases.
So I think I heard sort of a legalese term, motion to dismiss. For our audience, what is a motion to dismiss?
It's a legal argument that tells you say to the judge, even if everything in the complaint is proven true, it doesn't rise to a legally valid claim, and therefore it must be dismissed. But that means you have to assume the truth of all the allegations in the complaint, which is why it's hard to win a motion to dismiss, because you can't say the case should be thrown out because fact A isn't true. You have to say, assuming all the facts in the complaint are true, the case still doesn't have any legal merit. And that's a really tough standard, and that's why these cases are hard to get rid of early on.
And so is that sort of the chess move, if you will, to begin a settlement proceeding?
Yeah. In almost all of these cases, the defendant will want to file a motion to dismiss the case, and the plaintiff will file a motion to have it certified as a class action. Assuming the defendant loses the motion to dismiss and the judge grants the class action status, at that point, it's on a track to be settled. Because once the class action determination is made, almost no company is going to want to take that case to trial. So absent a judge really willing to take the bull by the horns, one of the cases in the current book is about happy cows. Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream maker, ran a campaign a couple years ago saying that its ice cream came from the milk and cream of happy cows. There was an actual lawsuit brought claiming that claim was not true. Those cows weren't happy.
That claim was bull?
It was bull. And actually the judge took the bull by the horns, so to speak, and dismissed the case.
So I heard.
In my book, however, my lawyers, Pap and Pup, are much more resourceful. They brought in their animal communicator, Dr. Doolittle, who went up to Vermont and went to all the farms that supply milk and cream to Ben & Jerry's, and were able to report to the judge that these cows are not happy. It's too cold in the winter, and also it's Vermont, and if they flatulate too much, they're going to be sent to the rendering plant. And so the judge allowed the case to proceed to trial, and the Peters brothers won a nice jury verdict, and everybody lived happily ever after.
I've always been interested about class action lawsuits. What percentage, and you can share with what your experience and what your thought is versus what are in your books, what percentage are theorized and concocted by the attorney and then seek out the plaintiff.
Oh, that's a common situation, and my books explore that. In most of the cases in the book, it starts with the lawyers having an idea for a lawsuit, and then they go out and look for someone to be the plaintiff. Now, that doesn't happen in every real life class action case, but it does happen in many cases. I'm this is too far in the past for me to remember accurately, but there was a well-known class action lawyer in New York who was actually disbarred because he was soliciting plaintiffs to be plaintiffs in his big time class action lawsuits. So I can't tell you what percentage of it that happens. Certainly in my book, in 80% of the cases, the lawyers come up with the case and then find the plaintiff.
Well, I certainly personally have received at least half a dozen letters asking if I'd bought a particular product that, I mean, from a complete stranger. I don't know how they get my how they get my address. And I get this letter saying, if you've bought such and such, let us know.
Yep.
I mean, that's what
you
a
can't
class
turn
action
on your television without seeing ads by lawyers to just that effect. If you have this medical condition, call us at this number. You may be part of a class. This is ubiquitous, and I think there's way too much of it.
And so your books are really bringing attention to this to the average reader. If you get a letter like this and you respond, I hope you enjoy the $15 that you're going to get.
Yeah, that's right. The average plaintiff in those cases walks away with almost nothing. Now it's different in the real class actions, the airline crashes, the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme. Members of the class are going to get real compensation there.
But the Bernie Madoff one, was famous. Did people actually get any compensation? Where did the money come from to compensate them?
Yes, they were able to recoup a lot of money. I think a lot of the money was money that Madoff had paid out because it was a Ponzi scheme. So as money came in from one investor, he paid it out to another. And the people, the lawyers who administered the class action were able to pull back a lot of the money he had paid out before the scheme was uncovered. And I can't tell you the number, but I think people got more than 50 cents on the dollar of what they had lost.
Of the actual money, not of the fictitious
Right.
appreciation of the money.
Yes, that was the big issue. Were they entitled to a share of the fictitious value, or merely what they had paid in? And luckily, it was ruled that it's what you paid in, not what the stock may have theoretically been worth. There's an interesting kicker on this in the real life FTX case that is now going through bankruptcy. There was just an article this week that they do have some money they've located that they're going to be able to pay out to some of the investors. And believe it or not, a lot of the investors don't want their money back. They want to get crypto.
Huh.
They want crypto and not money. It blows my mind.
So, Mark, let me just ask you real quick. You're a lawyer. How did this resonate with you?
Lawyer. Yeah. Attorney.
You're an attorney. Sorry.
I love it. No. Okay. I just like to correct you.
Okay, so Mark, you're an attorney. How does this resonate with you?
I'm a lawyer.
Right.
I think it's great. I think torts are necessary. Tort attorneys are necessary, right? Because it helps with product defects and false advertising on food, and it keeps people in line and doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's a check and a balance, right? With everything, it's slippery slope. I'm not a huge fan of the class action lawsuits as they are right now in our American jurisprudence. I do love satire. I do love humor. I do love laughing out loud. I do love laughing at uncomfortable things as well, which I'm sure makes this book even that much more appealing, which I can't wait to listen to. However, while in law school, we did have a discussion with one of our professors about the jokes, the lawyer jokes, and this was a criminal procedure professor, and he said to us, "Listen, anyone tells a lawyer joke, look them dead in the eye and say, it's all funny until you actually need your lawyer."
Yeah.
And you know what? It's we've had conversations about the police departments. We've had conversations about doctors, and a few rotten apples does not rot the whole lot. And it's human nature for folks to be doing nasty things. It doesn't matter what profession they're in, and they need to be called out and satirized.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
And
So let's do it.
and the vast majority, I think, of rotten fruit falls to the ground. Really, it falls off the tree. So,
Right.
so
Right.
TC, first of all, great discussion. So appreciated. You wanted to respond to Mark?
I'm just going to say, I certainly agree with what he said. After all, I spent 50 years as a practicing lawyer, 4 years of that time in the Air Force JAG Corps, and 45 years in New York, representing corporations in major litigations. So I don't at all mean to belittle the legal profession as a whole. Lawyers certainly play an important role in our society, but there's an extent to which some lawsuits and some lawyers go too far. And that's kind of what I'm trying to expose in my books.
Yeah. How do people find your books?
Other than my wife, who thought the first book had too many dirty words in it, she said, people will think you talk like that. And I said, oh, it's fiction. In any event, I would say all the people that I've heard from and who post reviews on Amazon have all said good things about the books. One of my favorites was a friend of mine from law school who read the first book as his wife was in the hospital for a really critical cancer surgery, and he was in the waiting room and he needed to pass the time. So he started reading my book, and he's laughing out loud every page, and these nurses are looking at him. Why are you laughing? Your wife is under
Oh
the
my
knife.
gosh, that's a great story. It reminds me
That is great.
of my wife when email first started. She thought that LOL meant lots of love and not laugh out loud. So she was writing to people, so sorry to hear about your divorce, LOL. And so sorry to hear about your
Oh my goodness.
LOL. But on a separate thing,
that is so
how
awesome.
do people get your books, TC?
Basically, they need to go to Amazon. It's all three books are available on Amazon. The way to get to Amazon is through my website, which is Torts, the word Torts, the letter R, tortsrusbook.com, tortsrusbook.com. If you go to the website, you'll see all kinds of interesting podcast interviews, and then you'll see a link to Amazon where you can easily get any of the three books in the series, or you can go to the Tort Museum in Winstead and pick up your own personal copy from the Tort Museum.
That's great. And that's Tort, T-O-R-T, not T-O-R-T-E like the French pastry.
Well, yeah, that's correct. In book 2, Please Pass the Torts, there's a dinner party episode where the guests are talking about legal tort, the difference between legal torts and the torts that are being passed around for people to eat for dessert. And
That's
there's
brilliant.
an amusing discussion about the difference between the two kinds of torts.
Great. It's definitely something to chew on. So I'm curious. So what are you working on now?
I'm at this point, I'm probably a one-trick pony. I don't think I'm going to write the great American novel, but I am working on the next book in the series. And the idea for this book came from my computer expert. I'm not very IT literate, and so I have a computer guy who comes and helps me with computer issues. And he said, gee, you ought to do something with AI in your next book. And so I am doing just that. I already have in mind a couple of legal cases that will involve AI, and that will probably be the centerpiece of the next book.
That's going to be great. I cannot wait to read that. That's going to be so much fun. So, the Dr. Joe Show is based on the I am approach, our current maximum potential. This is who I am. The idea that we're all doing the best we can, but influenced by and responding to 4 domains. Our home domain, no one's going to argue your home has had an influence on who you are. The social domain, which is the rest of the world. The biological domain of your brain and body. And what I call the I see domain. How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? Because the 4 domains interconnect, a small change in any of the domains can have a big effect. So the first truth of the I am, small changes can have big effects. TC, what small change can you recommend to our listeners based on our topic for tonight?
I think the change I would most recommend is that we all step back and not only enjoy a good laugh, but we step back from this constant need to be in each other's face, to sue for any imagined wrong that happens. Life happens. A lot of things happen in life. They're not all pleasant, but my gosh, to run to court every time something happens that you don't like, I think is a real excess. And I think people would benefit from stepping back for a minute and just thinking through where all of this is going. My first book in the series introduces a neighbor named Mona Lott, and she is in a constant battle with a neighbor who hates her, and the neighbor reports her to the police for shooing geese off her property, and the whole thing ends up in an arrest and a lawsuit. And if you think about it, neighbors shouldn't be calling the police on their neighbor. These things can be resolved in a more amicable method. So I think there's a tendency in the country. You see it in the political realm. You see it in the legal realm. Whenever we don't like something, we raise the decibel level and yell and shout at each other. And I think that's a big mistake.
Yeah. So, in other words, talk with someone, talk with the person, perhaps, or don't just take it to. I love the names that you create. Mona Lott is great. So, I think that's really important. I think we can all benefit from that small change. I'm sure everybody has some moment in their life where they thought, "Oh, I should sue this person," but step back. It's a really important insight. The second truth of the I am, everyone's got one. Everyone has an I see domain. They're interested in what you think or feel about them. And you know that has an effect on their biological domain because it feels different when you feel respected or disrespected. And you are part of someone's home or social domain. So this means you control no one, but you influence everyone. And you get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. TC Morrison, author, satirist, litigator, person with lived experience, 50 years in the legal system. What kind of influence do you want to be?
I think I would like to be an influence for reasoned discussion and debate. I'll give you 2 quick examples. I took over about 4 years ago as chair of our Republican town committee in our little town, Salisbury. The prior committee was an in-your-face committee that alienated everybody in town, including most of the Republicans. And I agreed to take on the project of resurrecting the committee. And I told everyone, look, we're a big tent committee. We want to make people take us seriously. We're not going to go after people. We're going to want people to see us as just a respected voice in the community that cares about local issues, turning down the decibel level. A more recent example, along with 4 of my Jewish friends, I helped put together a vigil for Israel just about a month ago in our local church. And we didn't publicize the event because we were afraid of potential demonstrations. But the event was a huge success. 80 people attended. We had over 90 people who signed on, allowed us to use their name as supporters. And a week after the event occurred, and we were all very pleased with the event, it went off really nicely with a lot of nice speakers. About a week later, a really nasty article appeared in the local paper saying that this was a disgrace, that this vigil doesn't reflect the feelings of the residents of Salisbury. The residents of Salisbury are furious with Israel and their treatment of Hamas and Palestinians. It was really a nasty, vile letter. My first instinct was to write a letter back in kind to the paper, saying how wrong this guy was. Then I thought that's just going to inflame things. So I stepped back and wrote a very different kind of letter, saying simply that this may or may not have represented how a majority of people in our town feel, but it certainly reflected the best of our town, people turning out to show their support for Israel and the Jewish community. And once I thought about it, that was clearly the right way to go. So that's the kind of influence I try to have in my private and public life.
Yeah, and that resonates completely with the I am approach. We're all doing the best we can. We don't have to like it, but we have to respect what other people think or feel based on the influence of their domains. And what you demonstrated is one of my phrases: keep it frontal, don't go limbic. That limbic, emotional, irrational, impulsive response will happen. You tempered it, and then you thought it through, and you were reflective instead of reflexive. And that's a wonderful influence to be. If we could all be like that, help each other be reflective, and just appreciate each other for their value, no matter what their position. So, TC Morrison, I want to thank you so much. Folks, please go out and get the book. Send in The Tort Lawyers, novel by TC Morrison, and all of his other books. They are a great read. You will be laughing out loud. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. Thank you, Mark. I'm very enjoyable.
It has been a pleasure. We'll see you all soon. Bye, folks. See you next week on The Dr. Joe Show.
Marilyn Monroe swallowed the pill. Did she do it for love, or was she tired of the thrill?